So, welcome everyone. I'm going to try to do the first installment here of our Clydesdale U. We are going to try to take a look at the history of the breed. Try to present here. Okay, so we're going to try to take a look at kind of the history of the Clydesdale breed, kind of look at some facts, some historical records, kind of bust a few myths, and kind of start to get an idea of what actually are we breeding for and why? So, why is it important to study some breed history? It's important so that we're tracking changes, breed trends and development. We're looking for patterns, right? A good Clydesdale in the 1950s is a good Clydesdale in 2025, and we're learning about why that statement is true. What are the elements that make up a horse that breeders have been selecting for? So, right, that's part of understanding breed type, the breed specific characteristics that are selected for and are maintained. That's the important point from generation to generation. Like, what are the qualities that make up the Clydesdale horse? What makes it unique? And what are those traits that we want to try to preserve? So, when we're developing a breed, there's some different factors, right? The agricultural resources of an area, that's the grassland, the water, the grain availability, labor, all these kind of things kind of play an important role in developing any breed of livestock, as well as society and culture. What are the things going on in the culture? What are the shared values? What are some of the developments that are happening, both culturally and economically? So, what are the economics? What kind of things are happening? The goods they trade, the type of materials that a country produces and a region produces, and how that kind of affects the livestock selections that are made. And then we're looking at individuals. What are those individual breeders selecting for and creating? So the development of the Clydesdale breed, we can kind of break it down through the centuries. So in the 17th century, we have kind of the proto Clydesdale. It's a bit more like a mountain and moorland pony type. We're moving into the 18th century. We're still kind of in that proto Clydesdale. The breed's not really fully formed. And we have two kind of key events that really spark it off. We have the agricultural revolution in the United Kingdom, and we have the Industrial Revolution. The two things kind of feed together, and they really develop the Clydesdale horse. In the 19th century, we have the formation of the stud book, a real fast drive to kind of uh, create and develop Clydesdale horses. And there's also a large international market for draft horses at this time. So there's like an economic boom. There's a huge number of exports that are happening. Farming, kind of being a livestock producer of just Clydesdale horses, like you would maybe Shorthorns or Angus cattle, becomes a super viable option for farmers. And you have people that are just specializing in the raising and selling of Clydesdale horses. In the 20th century, we really see kind of a perfecting of the breed, and then we see rapid development in the breed and a century of kind of stars. So when we're looking at like, where do these horses come from? There is a very popular myth, right, that the knights rode these horses into battle, right? These Shires, these Clydesdales, these big heavy horses, they needed them to uh, carry knights in plate. And really, that's just kind of a fantasy because this is really what the horses looked like in the Middle Ages. The average horse in the Middle Ages was about 12 hands high. That is the size of an Exmoor pony, a Welsh A. These are small horses. Like there's no big, massive draft horses that are lumbering down, the fields of battle. Most horses in this time period are small, right? There's not a lot of forage development. There's not a lot of storing of winter hay. There's definitely not a lot of storing of feed for livestock. A lot of these horses were turned out kind of the same way that mountain and moorland ponies are turned out today, kind of on general grassland. and they got to figure it out during the winter. So they don't grow out up very big, right? They're kind of in this smaller size. So proto Clydesdales, what did they kind of look like? Well, kind of a combo of the Highland pony and the Fell pony and the Dales pony, right? We can kind of see some of those similarities in these old Highland pony horses, right? The kind of shape that they have, the kind of hock structure, gaskin, cannon bone, pastern. This Highland pony actually has a bit of a set to its hock, like Clydesdales do, right? Kind of a similar head. We see a lot of similarities. So really draft horses are kind of bred up ponies in a way. These kind of sturdy, stocky ponies that kind of develop in time and are kind of bred up on improved pasture and improved husbandry to be larger. So we can really see that right in some of these early Clydesdales. Clydesdales in the early time didn't have tons of hair, weren't super huge. Uh, Most barely had any white markings on them. If they did, it was just a little bit on one foot or a stripe down their face. And you can see the similarities here between this horse, which is still kind of its type a little bit later into the development of the Clydesdale. How it kind of reflects that Mountain and Moorland pony type. So the first spark that really kind of creates Clydesdales as we know it today is the agricultural revolution. So this is when farming with horses really takes off. Wide scientific discovery of different new crops, cropping techniques, forage storing, making of hay. All of these kind of things kind of blossom. Livestock is grazed more often. The horses that are needed to kind of plow and operate the new farm equipment, we need them to be a lot bigger. They're still not as huge as kind of the draft horses we see today, but they're bigger, stockier. They're fed up kind of Highland pony types, right? You can see similarities between the two breeds, but a lot more size and a lot more power. The second spark that really hits it off is the Industrial Revolution, right? So now you have this agricultural revolution and this industrial revolution that are working in tandem. And we need horses to haul coal, haul freight, haul steel, haul all of these things on the city streets. They unload rail cars. They do a whole lot of things. They unload ships. They work in the ferry industry. They pull kind of different ships down canals, and you start to need a certain type of horse to work in the city streets, right? To kind of move these freights. Streets are usually paved now, paved in cobblestone. That's quite difficult for horses, smaller horses, to kind of navigate. They require a different type of shoulder, a different kind of propulsion in the rear, a different kind of foot. And that kind of our hitch industry today, like the famous Anheuser-Busch, right? This evolves from that legacy, right? These freight horses that are working on city streets, right? We need that hind set and that kind of type of hind leg to give propulsion on these city streets to keep them from falling. These Clydesdales are bred kind of as a two-gated horse, right? The walk, a long, open, ground covering walk, and also a ground covering trot. Uh, as a bonus, the trot was, developed to be fairly attractive, right? That was kind of the feather on the cap, but that needs to be a functional trot. And the horses move kind of closer together in the rear, right, in that trot. And that's about working on that city street, right? A horse that's set like a Suffolk punch that are on all four corners. When they get onto these city streets, sometimes they're slipping, they're falling, they're doing all those kind of things. They're crossing in Clydesdales and these draft horses with light horses to get kind of this commercial horse. In Canada, there's still classes for commercial horses, right? But that's putting a little bit of set in those legs. It's putting a little bit more foot for them to grip the ground on. These are kind of important wearing qualities for when we're working on city streets. And then, so the third spark that we have, right, is the formation of agricultural societies and shows. So, in order to improve the economic situation in the cities, right, and the market for draft horses, they wanted to kind of keep improving the type, improving the quality. So societies kind of formed to kind of sponsor premiums and prizes. If we want to look here at the premium list from the Royal Agricultural Society show in 1900, so we're seeing premiums for cattle, but also look at how large these premiums are for Clydesdale horses, and that's looking at $2,000 in today's money uh, for first place. So as those premiums kind of provide a huge incentive for breeding horses, there are people that then go on show circuits and they're making as much money as kind of an average middle class person is making in a year in showing horses. And that's something that we kind of forget because these premiums really haven't changed much over the years. Like $80 is still kind of like a premium. But back when these horses were really being developed, it was like a wage type premium, right? These are things that made quite a bit of money for the people that were exhibiting horses. So as that kind of goes forward, these premiums, it kind of starts to change this type, right? This type, uh, which some people kind of still look back at and love, it goes away. And the reason that it goes away is because it's not really meeting the freight horse demands that are needed, and it's not meeting the kind of export demands that are needed, right? So they're a little too short. It's a little too sway back. That was a big knock on the breed. We have these kind of thicker, fatter hocks, you know, lower to the ground. These are kind of horses that are okay for agricultural work, but they're not ideal for large freight work. So the horse that really kind of sparks it, and if you want some extra credit, find out who research who said this, right? If you don't know the Baron of Bucclivy, then you don't know anything about Clydesdale. So this is the horse that really kind of sparks the revolution of the breed that we see today. And there's kind of two horses that really spark that. There's the horse Hiawatha, which we see up here on the left. Right, we're seeing the Clydesdale type. This is very indicative of the type of Clydesdale we want to see today. Maybe he's not the biggest, but deep hip, flat bone, that pastern, that foot, those things. This horse was almost unstoppable in the show ring. They had to change the Clutter Cup rules because he kept winning it. So he didn't really make a huge mark fertility wise through his offspring on the breed, but he really did make a huge mark on the stockmen of the day and what they really appreciated about him. He was a beautiful moving horse. He really could move out on all fours really well. And he really shaped kind of the modern Clydesdale type that we would like to see. And this other horse that did shape both the type and did it through breeding was the famous stallion Baron of Bucclivy. He was the highest selling horse of any species, even race horses, in his time. He sold for a small fortune. He made back the small fortune for the people who spent it on him. He was so in demand as a breeding horse because he was really throwing this type that was in demand for the export market and also in demand for the dock work and street trade, right? So we're looking at a little bit taller horse, higher, hocked horse, flat bone, clean joints, nice slope to the shoulder, nice neck on him, and he really throws a modern stamp. So here are two of his sons. Like this is a huge departure from the kind of low to the ground fat hocked horse that we saw before, right? These are very, very modern Clydesdale horses. We have Dinner Kaleidoscope, beautiful necked horse. You know, we're seeing the great depth of body that we want, that length of hip, shorter in the Gaskins, nice flat bone, good open feet. These are all things that are going to really stamp the breed going forward. We have another son that same thing, Craigie Litigant, a Calder Cup winner himself. So these are kind of the stamp that this horse is producing. He throws a lot of sons that go on to be great breeding horses. One of his other sons that pretty famous, a black horse called Denur Footprint. This is a picture of him kind of a little later in his years, but he was a tremendous breeding horse. You'll find him in nearly all modern pedigrees if you dig back far enough. Uh, Tons of good horses that he produced. Here's a daughter of his that won the Calder Cup and also went to Australia, Orange Blossom. You're really seeing that big, weighty kind of Clydesdale start to emerge, right? She's got the body size, she's got the bone, the flatness of bone, she's got the depth of hip and the width across the rear. Really kind of modern type horse for her time. Another highly impactful son was Bonnie Clivey. Uh, again, we're seeing that kind of this is the demand for the type of horse that we want to see for the street trade. They want geldings from stallions like this. They last longer. They're bigger. They can unload freight cars easier. They cover more ground easier. They keep easier. They everything about them is in higher demand. They can be used to crossbred on light horses or different draft horse mares to kind of improve their limbs. So these kind of horses are being sent to Australia, South Africa. They're being sent to South America. They're being sent to Russia. There's a huge market for them, including the United States and Canada. So Bonnie, here we can see his daughter, Craigie Sunray, really a kind of tremendous typed mare. You look at that depth of hip that she has, that width across her croup. You know, good enough neck, long enough neck, great slope to the shoulder. You know, uh, the interesting thing is that like on some of these horses, right, you see a little bit more front pastern on them. They add a little bit sometimes. Of doctoring a little bit to the hair and stuff to kind of accentuate that in the photos, but very modern in her rear leg construction and design. uh so this is the kind of horses that are starting to kind of rapidly be developed. Like this is in a span of 20 years, right? The type is really moving forward at a quick pace. uh Another son of Craigie is Craigie McQuaid, another son of Bonnie McClivey, ultra modern type horse. And his son is a horse that really kind of sets the bar for Clydesdales. Even today, I think that a lot of people would be loving and I have a this is Craigie Beau Ideal. Craigie Beau Ideal is the son of Craigie McQuaid. Uh, Really, really modern type of horse, had a huge impact in the breed. So there's some things that we kind of want to discuss. Monty has been posting a lot of photos and different things, older photos, slightly newer photos, just to kind of get an idea of what that silhouette looks like of these horses, right? What's kind of the ideal type that we're looking at, that you can just step back, not really look at the fine details, but just look at the big picture, the legs, the body, the balance, how they should be looking. So one thing that I'd like to have in the discussion is, let's kind of think about some of these things that are fact or fiction, right? People didn't ride Clydesdales into battle. That's only really in the movie Braveheart. Uh, Instead, they were developed in the Industrial Revolution. So, what are some of the kind of facts that you've heard about Clydesdale horses that you really want verified? Like, what's the truth and what's the fiction? We kind of want to debunk a few of those things. Like, you might hear that, well, black is not a original color, that they came from Shires. Not really true. Blacks were an original color of Clydesdale. So were grays, sorrels. There was a bunch of different color patterns. There were some true roans at one point in time, the same that you would see in quarter horses. That's disappeared. But there are a lot of myths out there about Clydesdale horses that may or may not be true. So another discussion point, right? We see these breeders that have rapidly developed the Clydesdale breed. And it's the same kind of heavy hitters, right? Deneur, Craigie Mains, Sandino. There's these guys really kind of harvesting. These guys really kind of develop the horse rapidly. But they have a strong vision of where it needs to go, of the type that's both desirable and the type that kind of lasts a long while. Because part of this appeal of the Clydesdale horse at the time, and even up into the 70s, was their wearing ability. Horses lived into their 20s working on city streets. They raised foals, they bred mares. It was the longevity of the breed was a selling point, right? Uh, and into the 70s, we had horses like Kirkland Hill Queen of Carrick that, she was still a champion into her, later years. She won the Royal Winter Fair 14 times. We have, horses like Colossi's Maple Footprint that, she was being shown until she was 20 and very, very fresh on her joints, still being in the hitch and in the halter ring and raising foals. So that longevity of the breed was super important to a lot of these guys early on. So I want you to think in the discussion and start to kind of talk about it. Is like, what is your plan? What are the type of horses that you want to breed? Do you know what you want to breed? Right? What are the things that you're focusing on? But more importantly, how are you going to get there? Start to kind of think about what are the choices you have to make in your breeding decisions. Is it just what's ever available, what's ever down the road, or are you starting to make some kind of calculated um, choices? Right? Uh, what kind of things are you thinking about, both in conformation that you're wanting to try to create and also in functionality? Like, we want to see mares that foal easily, raise their foals easily, stallions that are fertile, that breed easily, that have a good temperament to be around. These are also things that can be, matched with the conformation traits that we want to see going forward. So that's kind of going to be the discussion a little bit for this week. Like, what is your plan, and how do you think that you're going to get there? So that's kind of our brief early overview of the Clydesdale horse. We're not going to get too bogged down into some of those early horses because they really disappear from both the breed type and the breed records. There's many, many, many champions in the United States that just are gone. Right, they're no longer in our gene pool and they're no longer a factor. So it's easier to kind of like, let's focus when we're thinking about history stuff, really focus on in the 1900s, those Baron of Buccleuch offspring that kind of create um, this kind of boom in the Clydesdale horse. So, any questions that you might have, I'm going to put this into kind of a discussion panel, and please leave them, and we'll continue this discussion later this week.